"Are you lost too?" a little girl asked the lonely billionaire at the airport, and everything changed. The loudspeaker crackled overhead, a garbled symphony of delays and gate changes swallowed by the hum of holiday chaos. JFK on Christmas Eve wasn't just crowded, it was alive with noise, movement, and a kind of collective impatience only airports could produce. Children cried, suitcases squeaked, phones buzzed. Somewhere, someone dropped a coffee and cursed under their breath. Matthew Weaver adjusted the cuff of his charcoal coat and checked his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Flight 218 to London, still on time. Miraculous. He exhaled through his nose, then moved forward, his leather shoes clicking across the marble floor with precise, practiced confidence. He wasn't here to celebrate anything. He had told his team he needed to close a deal overseas before the year ended. That wasn't a lie. But the truth, the aching, quiet truth, was that there was nothing left for him at home. No tree, no stockings, no child's laughter bouncing off the walls. Not anymore. He passed a family in matching pajamas, arguing over boarding passes, and forced his gaze forward. Focus. One more flight. One more meeting. Keep moving. Keep working. That was when he saw her. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor near a vending machine, small and still, her little coat bunched awkwardly around her shoulders. A worn pink backpack rested beside her. Her hair was slightly messy, the way little kids' hair always was, and her sneakers lit up whenever she shifted her feet. Matthew would have walked right past if she hadn't looked up and spoken. "Are you lost too?" He froze. The words were simple, soft, but they struck him with the force of a freight train. He blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. She tilted her head slightly. "You look lost." He glanced around. No adult nearby, no frantic parent calling a name. Just this tiny girl looking at him like she could see straight through the polished exterior. "I'm not," he began, then stopped. What was he supposed to say? That he wasn't lost, just hollow? "I'm waiting," she said, not moving. "But my mom said, if I ever get really lost, I should stay where I am and not talk to strangers." "You're a stranger." Matthew nodded slowly. "That's a smart rule." She squinted. "But you don't look like a bad stranger." "Thanks, I guess." She pointed to the vending machine. "Do you have $1? I'm hungry." He hesitated, then pulled out his wallet and crouched down beside her. At eye level, she looked even smaller. Her coat sleeves were too long, and there was a smudge of chocolate near her lip. He slid $1 into the machine and pressed a button. A small bag of crackers dropped with a mechanical thud. "Thank you," she said, taking the bag carefully. Matthew sat beside her, unsure why. For a moment, they ate in silence, crackers for her, the rest of his bottled water for him. The airport moved around them like a tide, but in that pocket of space, time bent strangely. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Sophie." "I'm Matthew." She nodded seriously, then paused. "Are you a dad?" His breath caught. "I used to be." "Oh," her voice softened. "I'm sorry, did your kid get lost too?" 1,000 answers burned behind his ribs, none of them making it to his lips. "She's gone," he said, voice barely audible. Sophie nodded like she understood far too much for someone her size. "I think my mum is looking for me right now. We were going to visit Grandma in Florida, but I dropped my bear after the security line, and when I turned around, she was gone." "Your mum must be really worried." "I know," she whispered, "but she always says crying doesn't help. So I'm being brave." He studied her, the way she clenched her jaw, held her shoulders up, blinked quickly every now and then, like she was fighting something heavy. It stirred something in him, something buried. "I think we should find an airport worker," he said gently. "They can help us find your mum." Sophie shook her head. "I already tried. The lady at the counter said to sit down and wait, but she was busy." Matthew stood and offered his hand. She hesitated, then looked into his eyes like she was searching for something. He knelt again, lowered his water bottle toward her. "It's okay if you're scared." "I'm not," she said, even though she clearly was. After a moment, She took his hand. As they walked toward the information desk, Matthew noticed a small frayed teddy bear poking out from the top of her backpack. It was the same kind his daughter had, a limited edition plush from some forgotten toy store. The same shade of golden brown, the same faded ribbon around the neck. His throat tightened. He looked away. They passed a group of carolers singing near a gift shop, their harmonies drowned out by boarding announcements. Sophie hummed along softly, almost absent-mindedly, still holding his hand. "I like your coat," she said suddenly. "Thanks. You smell like peppermints and soap." He smiled, the first real smile in weeks. Not a bad combo. When they reached the desk, there was no one there. A small sign read, "Be back in 5 minutes." Sophie sighed. "We can wait," Matthew said, scanning the area. "Or we can keep looking." Sophie tugged his arm. "Let's walk. I don't want to sit still anymore." They moved slowly through the terminal, weaving between suitcases and strollers and couples in long, tired lines. He guided her gently, always alert, protective in a way that felt instinctual, ancient. "How old are you?" he asked. 5 3/4. "Big age." "Yeah. My mom says I act like I'm 6 already." Matthew nodded, swallowing a sudden lump in his throat. As they neared gate 26, Sophie's pace slowed. She leaned against his side without thinking, and he let her. His eyes scanned for staff, for announcements, for anything helpful. But in that moment, nothing mattered except the small weight of her hand in his. They were two strangers in an airport, one tiny, one tired, both walking through the noise toward something they hadn't named yet. And though neither of them knew what came next, neither pulled away. The airport was a labyrinth, a glowing, humming, ever-moving machine filled with blinking monitors, gate numbers, and people who looked equally stressed and distracted. Matthew hadn't realized just how massive JFK could feel when you weren't rushing to your own destination, when you were searching for someone instead. Sophie held tightly to his hand, her steps short but steady. "We've been here before," she said, looking up as they passed a coffee shop for the second time. Matthew glanced around. "I think you're right." She sighed in that dramatic, theatrical way only kids can pull off. "We're walking in circles." "Airports are circles," he replied. "Just more rectangular ones." She narrowed her eyes. "That's not how shapes work." Matthew chuckled, and to his own surprise, it didn't feel forced. They paused near a security checkpoint. Matthew approached a woman in a blue airport vest who looked halfway between exhausted and annoyed. "Excuse me," he said. "This little girl is lost. We're trying to find her mother." The woman barely looked up. "Information desk is over there, sir." "They're not there right now," he said. "Then wait for them to return." Before he could respond, the woman turned back to her clipboard. Sophie looked up at him. She wasn't very helpful. "No," Matthew said. She really wasn't. As they walked again, Sophie started asking questions, casual at first, then more personal. "Do you like your job?" "It pays the bills." "What does that mean?" "It means I work too much." "Do you have a dog?" "No." "Why not?" "I travel too much." "Do you have a wife?" "No," he said, then added, "Not anymore." She fell quiet for a moment, then said gently, "I think you'd be good at being a dad." Matthew didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he gestured toward a set of escalators. "Let's check upstairs." They rode the moving stairs side by side, Sophie gripping the rail tightly. At the top, a toddler sat on the floor wailing while his overwhelmed mother tried to soothe him with little success. Sophie let go of Matthew's hand and approached without hesitation. She knelt beside the boy and reached into her backpack, pulling out a small, wrapped candy cane. "It's not a toy," she whispered, "but it's sweet." The boy took it. The crying slowed. Sophie stayed until he smiled, then stood and walked back to Matthew like nothing had happened. "She said crying doesn't help," she said, shrugging, "but sometimes candy does." He stared at her, something shifting deep inside him. They moved on. Sophie pointed out lights she liked, children dressed as elves, a man wearing antlers. "That's not a real reindeer," she said with certainty. "No?" Nope. Reindeer don't wear sunglasses. As they passed Gate 12, a TSA agent standing near the metal detector noticed them and waved. "Hey," he called, "you two looking for something?" Matthew hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, this girl got separated from her mother. We've been trying to find help." The agent's expression softened. "Yikes, poor kid." He crouched to Sophie's level. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Okay, Sophie. What's your mom's name?" Sophie paused. "Kate Morrison." The agent stood. "All right. I'll radio it in. Sit tight, we'll figure this out." Matthew and Sophie sat on a nearby bench. For the first time in over an hour, she leaned against him like she was finally letting herself feel tired. He watched the TSA agent speak into his shoulder radio, the static sounds barely reaching them. A few minutes passed, then a few more. Another family came and went, the parents dragging sleepy children in coats that were too warm for the inside air. The loudspeaker overhead buzzed, then delivered a muffled announcement. "Paging passenger Kate Morrison. Please return to Gate 26. Your daughter is waiting." Matthew stood immediately. "That's her." Sophie's eyes lit up. "That's my mom." They thanked the agent and began weaving back through the terminal. Sophie nearly skipped as she walked. Matthew's heart beat faster, not just for Sophie, but for something else he couldn't quite name. Anticipation, relief, maybe even dread. But when they arrived at Gate 26, it was empty. A different agent stood behind the counter. "Kate Morrison," she repeated. "She was just here. An officer was escorting her to check another gate." "Which gate?" Matthew asked, his voice sharper than intended. "I think she said C concourse. She looked really upset." Sophie's face fell. Matthew crouched in front of her. "Hey, it's okay. We'll find her. What if she's scared?" "She's probably thinking the same thing about you." "I want her to know I'm okay," Sophie said quietly. He took her hand again, more firmly this time. "We'll let her know. Let's go." They moved quickly now, Matthew carrying Sophie for part of the way when her legs started to give out. She didn't protest. She rested her head against his shoulder like she belonged there. As he walked, fragments of memory bubbled up. His daughter's laugh when she played with building blocks, the way she'd fall asleep in the car and refused to wake up even when he carried her inside, the smell of her shampoo, the high-pitched squeal she made when they saw snow for the first time together. For the first time in years, those memories didn't come with the crushing weight of guilt. They came with warmth, alive, human. By the time they reached C concourse, Sophie had dozed off, her breath slow and even against his neck. He kept walking anyway, his steps careful, his eyes scanning faces. He was no longer just helping. He was searching. And somewhere beyond the crowd, he knew someone else was too. Snow had started falling outside the terminal windows, soft and slow like the airport was being wrapped in something quiet. The kind of storm that didn't announce itself with drama, just crept in and settled. Matthew sat near gate C19, Sophie asleep across his lap, her body curled like a cat, small fingers loosely gripping the zipper of his coat. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes, afraid to wake her. The announcement had come while they were still searching for Kate, flight delayed due to weather. When they finally found her near the sea gates, pacing in tight circles with red eyes and trembling hands, Sophie had woken just in time to call out, "Mom!" Kate turned, froze, and ran. She dropped to her knees on the tile floor as Sophie threw herself into her arms. The reunion was a tangle of sobs and laughter, and too many whispered apologies to count. Matthew stood back, watching. Part of him was ready to slip away. His job was done. The girl was safe. Her mother was here. He didn't expect Kate to turn around, still holding Sophie, and say, "Please don't go." He hesitated. She started, then stopped. "I didn't get to thank you. Really, thank you." Matthew gave a small shake of his head. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She stood, shifting Sophie to one hip. "I was out of my mind. They told me she was seen near gate 12, then gate 26. Then they weren't sure. I thought—" Her voice broke. She swallowed hard. "And then she showed up holding your hand like she wasn't scared at all." "She's brave," he said quietly. "She is," Kate agreed, then added, Too brave sometimes. Sophie looked at him sleepily and said, "Can Matthew sit with us, Mum? Just until the snow stops." Kate smiled. "Only if he wants to." He surprised himself by nodding. Now, nearly an hour later, the three of them were still there, seated along the long row of chairs near the windows. Outside, planes sat idle under a haze of white. Inside, the overhead lights buzzed and flickered in places. Kate was scrolling her phone, glancing at email, then back at the gate screen. Matthew watched the storm. Sophie slept. "So," Kate said after a long silence, "what kind of man takes care of a stranger's kid for 2 hours on Christmas Eve?" Matthew exhaled through his nose. "A very confused one." She gave a soft laugh. "Well, I'm grateful for confused men, then." He shrugged. "Wasn't really a choice. She just asked if I was lost, too." Kate looked over at him, her expression shifting. "She's like that. She sees things most people miss." "Yeah," he said, "she really does." A moment passed. Then another. "You travel for work?" she asked. "Too much." "What do you do?" "Corporate development, mergers, acquisitions, the boring stuff." "Sounds exhausting." "It is." Kate tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm a writer." He looked over. "Oh yeah?" "Trying to be, anyway. So far it's been humbling." "What do you write?" "Novels," she said. "Mostly character-driven, small stories. The kind of thing that gets you really nice rejection emails." Matthew smiled. "I'm guessing you're good at it. Because I said humbling instead of soul-crushing. Because you're still doing it." She tilted her head. "You're hard to read." "Good." Kate looked down at Sophie and adjusted her coat so it covered more of her shoulders. Her hand froze. "She's holding something." Matthew followed her gaze. Sophie's arm was wrapped around the small teddy bear that had been sticking out of her backpack since the beginning. "That's not hers," Kate said, brow furrowed. "She didn't have that before." Matthew said nothing. Kate looked at him, realization dawning. "It's yours?" He gave a slow nod. "You gave it to her?" "She found it in my bag. I didn't stop her." There was a beat of silence, the sound of a vacuum cleaner droning from another terminal. Somewhere someone laughed too loudly. Kate spoke softly. "Was it your daughter's?" Matthew didn't answer right away. "Yes." "I'm sorry." He nodded once. 3 years ago, she got sick. It was fast. We thought we had time." Kate didn't ask anything else, just sat there, eyes shiny, breathing slow. "She would have liked Sophie," he added, almost to himself. "She had that same look, like she was always in on a secret the rest of us didn't understand." They sat in silence after that, not the awkward kind, the kind that lets you rest. Eventually, Kate checked her phone again. "Still delayed," she said, sighing. "Might be stuck here for a while." Matthew looked down at Sophie, still sleeping peacefully. "She trusts you," Kate said quietly. "I didn't expect that." "She doesn't trust easily." He didn't answer. He couldn't. "You ever think about starting over?" Kate asked suddenly. "Every day. I mean really starting over, not running, not hiding in work, just letting go." Matthew looked at her. "Is that what you're doing?" Kate smiled sadly. "Trying." The lights overhead dimmed slightly, part of the airport's energy-saving cycle. The snow outside continued to fall, heavier now, blurring the view of the runways. Matthew leaned back in his seat, the weight of Sophie against his side grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Maybe this wasn't a detour after all. Maybe this was the gate he was always meant to find. The snow finally stopped sometime after midnight. Not that anyone announced it. It just ended. The hum of delay gave way to boarding calls, the subtle shift of people gathering their things, zipping up coats, rechecking passports. Gate C-19 came back to life. Kate stood slowly, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her coat draped across her arm. Sophie was groggy but cheerful, clutching a half-eaten candy cane and yawning between words. "Mum, can I sit by the window this time? If you don't fall asleep before takeoff, sure." Matthew stood too, unsure what to do with his hands. For hours they'd sat in a strange pocket of quiet and connection. Now with their flight reboarding, Reality pressed in again. Kate looked at him. "We should go." "Of course." Sophie turned, holding something in her palm, a small, slightly crumpled piece of foil. "This is for you," she said. Matthew knelt to her height, confused. She carefully placed the bundle into his hand. "I made it with Mom yesterday. It's a Christmas cookie. A real one, not from a store." He unwrapped a corner. It was misshapen, unevenly iced, probably full of crumbs. It was perfect. "Thank you," he said, voice tight. Sophie hugged him suddenly, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Sophie." Kate touched his arm gently. "Here." She handed him a small card. Her email, neatly written. A scribble in Sophie's handwriting at the bottom. "Thank you, Mr. Matthew." He looked at the card, then at her. "You really saved us," she said. "More than you know." Matthew opened his mouth to reply, but words failed. He only nodded. They turned toward the gate, and then, just like that, they were gone. Kate found the bear somewhere over North Carolina. Sophie was asleep in the window seat, her cheek pressed to the plastic wall, mouth open slightly. Kate reached into her daughter's backpack for a coloring book and paused. There, nestled between crayons and a pair of socks, was a small, worn teddy bear. Not Sophie's. She knew instantly. She lifted it gently, her breath catching. The ribbon was frayed. One button eye was slightly loose. The fur had that soft, overloved texture that only time and grief could create. It had been his. Her hand shook slightly as she tucked it back inside. No note, no message. Just a quiet act of letting go. Or maybe a promise. Back in New York, Matthew sat alone in the back of a yellow cab. The city looked different somehow, muted under leftover snow and Christmas lights blinking like distant stars. He turned the foil-wrapped cookie over in his hands, carefully setting it in his coat pocket like something sacred. He didn't cry, but the ache in his chest felt different now. Less like drowning, more like thawing. At home, he placed the cookie on the mantel. He didn't eat it. 3 days later, her name appeared in his inbox, Kate Morrison. Sample chapters. He had asked for them at the gate almost jokingly. She laughed, said, "You'll regret it," and promised to send a few. He opened the file expecting a quiet distraction. He read the entire thing in one sitting. The manuscript wasn't polished. It wasn't market-ready. But it had soul, the kind of soul that editors couldn't teach. It was raw, beautiful, and deeply human. He closed the laptop, stared at the screen for a long time. Then he forwarded it to a contact, a woman at a small publishing house in Boston who owed him a favor. He didn't tell Kate. He just hoped. 1 year later, JFK was just as loud, just as chaotic. Same blinking monitors, same squeaky suitcases, and people walking too fast. Matthew stood near gate C-19 again, holding a small bouquet of winter flowers. Tucked beneath them was a copy of a paperback book, one with Kate Morrison's name on the cover in quiet gold lettering. He checked his watch. Their flight should have landed. His heart thudded in a way that felt foolish and real. Then he saw them. Sophie spotted him first. She ran, coat flapping, hat slightly askew, and launched into his arms without hesitation. "You came." "I told you I would," he said, lifting her easily. Kate appeared a moment later, her suitcase in tow, her smile slower but warmer. "You read the book?" she asked. "I read the first draft before anyone else," he replied. Her eyes widened. "You sent it?" "I did." Her face softened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Didn't want to promise anything." Kate stepped closer. "You broke all the rules, you know." "I'm starting to like breaking them." Sophie tugged on his sleeve. "Do you want to come to Grandma's with us?" Kate raised a brow. "That's a bold offer." Matthew looked between them. "Maybe I could meet you after. Dinner, maybe." Kate smiled. "We'd like that." He handed her the flowers and the book. She took both, looked down at the cover and said softly, "Thank you." He didn't need to ask what she meant. They didn't make promises. But they didn't need to. They'd already found each other once. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something worth staying for.